Welcome. Today I will be presenting the Women in Standards Survey, Inclusion in Standards, a survey of U.S. ANSI-accredited standards developing organizations. My name is Karen Athanas, and I am the Executive Officer of Women in Standards, a nonprofit 501c3 organization which works with the standardization industry to develop and promote a diverse ecosystem of standards development participants. Through our outreach and programs, we invite new individuals to the standards community, provide them with support and education to help them grow in their role as standards contributors and professionals, and bring visibility to issues of inclusion and balance in standards development. In late 2019, Women in Standards launched a survey of ANSI-accredited standards developing organizations to gain insights on the status and composition of standards participation, and to gain a benchmark on the level of participation and insights on the extent to which standards developers were tracking the demographics of their members. On July 28th of 2020, we published our survey, and today I'll be reviewing some of the learning points gained. All organizations that participated in the study were American National Standards Institute, ANSI-accredited American National Standards developers. Out of 240 possible participants, 79 took part, resulting in a response rate of 33%. 3 additional responses were included in the results, leading to 81 official survey responses. In a review of industry categories, most respondents stated that they served the following industries: energy and natural resources and services, construction, manufacturing. A response of other was the most common selection. However, when we dug into it, we've identified that these came from unique sector areas that also fell within larger industries. Also, there were several SDOs that serviced more than one industry, and so they selected other as the best fit for their organization. There are 3 interest categories identified as required by the ANSI essential requirements. These are producer, user, and general interest. However, standards developers also use subcategories and category descriptions to refine their standards participant categories and enhance their outreach efforts. While anecdotal, it is interesting to note that keywords that repeat throughout those descriptions submitted by SDOs include manufacturer, industry, producer, association, government, and finally public. Public in this case could be used to refer to consumers or those affected by the application of the standard, either directly or indirectly. The survey asked SDOs to identify which interest categories were the most difficult to fill. The highest ranking response, with 52%, was user category, with respondents indicating that this was the most difficult to fill. General interest came in second, with 42% of respondents indicating difficulty finding participants that fell into this category. Where producers incorporate standards into their products and services, the user category are those that then use the produced products and services in their day-to-day lives. A few examples are children and adults, industry professionals such as electricians and doctors, and government agencies. General interest would be those groups that don't easily fall into the user or producer categories. A few examples would be those that have an interest in further developing the standard, measuring its use, and encouraging its use. Regarding women representation on standards committees, 93% of SDOs participating in the study responded that they did not track the demographics, meaning gender, race, or age, of the participants. And we'll come back to this later in the presentation. When asked to identify, based on their personal knowledge of the committees, what percentage of the membership participating in standards development were women, 53% indicated that the percentage of women participants was less than 10%, and 25%, or 1/4 of survey participants, indicated that participation fell somewhere between 10 and 30%. That means that 88% of those surveyed indicated that the participation of women in standards development was at or less than 30%. Considering that the average man to woman ratio in the United States, not adjusting for age, education, or other factors, is roughly 50%, 30% falls well below the national average. And only 5% of all surveyed respondents reported a higher than average response, that the level of participation of women in their standards programs reached 51 to 70%. As a key element of the survey, we wanted to explore the possible reasons for this lack of participation. And so we asked SDOs what they thought was contributing to participants leaving the standards industry early or choosing not to participate at all. The obstacle reported as creating the greatest deterrent was time resources, which was reported as an issue by 30% of all respondents. Interest and value proposition was identified as the second greatest deterrent. And through interviews with SDOs, we learned that users, people who are working full-time jobs and trying to help write standards in their free time, struggle to participate. For one, meetings are typically held during the workday, and two, meetings can be quite long, running several hours or a full day if it's an in-person meeting. Also, if the meetings are held in person, user and general interest participants might find it difficult to schedule and afford the time off to travel and voluntarily participate. Interest and value proposition, which was identified as the second greatest deterrent, then determines whether the user or general interest participant will decide whether the time and cost constraints are worth the benefit they receive from participating. For example, if a user's employer is encouraging participation and will pay for the travel and provide time during the workday, the obstacle to participation, time, goes down, and the value, being rewarded by an employer, goes up, ultimately increasing the likelihood that the individual will participate. Also, where there is a specific change to the standard that the user or general interest group is pursuing, that can also increase the likelihood that they will continue. A good example is for products. A consumer might participate to help provide language related to how the product works or the safety requirements placed on the product. In this case, that language directly affects the user and their use of that product, and so this increases the value proposition, making it more valuable for them to continue participating in hopes of including that desired language in the final standard. And a final speed bump that was identified as a deterrent to participation is knowledge of the standards development process. 14% of respondents indicated that this was an issue, and in our post-survey interviews with several SDOs, they further elaborated that when new participants, especially in the user and general interest categories, joins the standards body, in many cases they were immediately overwhelmed by the process and dynamics involved in developing standard. Many SDOs offer training and online tutorials to help get new participants educated in the process and encourage them to review the procedures and style guides. But this element of soft skills continues to create difficulties. Things like ensuring new participants are heard, can communicate their thoughts clearly, feel that they can share opinions openly, and deal with the more difficult elements of standards development like conflict resolution and building coalitions to gain consensus. Considering the various hurdles and speed bumps faced, SDOs make use of a wide range of approaches to reach new audiences and encourage their participation in standards development. For this survey, Women in Standards explored the use of social media marketing, engagement with associations, engagement with educational institutions, direct outreach, print and mail advertising, and the ANSI Standards or Action publication as outreach strategies. In reviewing responses from participants, direct outreach and engagement with associations were identified as the most often used by SDOs. Direct outreach, which would include any proactive actions where the SDO reached out to an individual or a group, things like calling individuals, replying to their tweets or in chat groups, and presentations and networking at conferences. In our review of SDOs, 26% reported using engagement with associations as one of their main outreach strategies, and 43% reported that it was highly effective in attracting new individuals to the standards development process. Engagement with association includes activities such as providing training and presentations to association members, forming partnerships to develop standards and other publications, participating in online Q&As, developing scholarship programs, and offering shared resources. Following the completion of our 2020 survey, Women in Standards continues to explore with the standards communities those issues that may be deterring individuals from participating in standards, in particular women. Some anecdotal suggestions include women encounter a culture where they don't feel welcome or able to express their opinions, has caused some to leave the standards community early. In another case, the individuals weren't able to learn the standards process, and a lack of understanding caused them to become frustrated and lose sight of the value of participation. In other cases, the individuals lose the support of the organization or company that was providing them with the time or resources to participate. This could be for many reasons, a change of employment or a change of priorities for the organization as examples. And where the support of the organization was removed, the individual could no longer commit to continued participation. Women in Standards has also continued to work with our partners to develop or bring visibility to available resources for participants to address some of the hurdles identified in the study. For Women in Standards, there were several lessons learned from the study that we'd like to share. For one, we hope future studies will include a larger data set of standards developing organizations. This would allow us to more closely evaluate whether the underrepresentation of women in certain interest categories is prevalent in certain industries and look for gender imbalances in interest categories. We would also like to expand our survey beyond the US based standardization bodies to ensure our reach has the broadest application to the standards industry. Finally, I noted earlier in the presentation that 95% of organizations surveyed do not track the demographics of their participants. There were many reasons for this, and we continue to explore those with the US-based standards bodies. Some of the insights we've gained include: one, it's difficult to offer a comprehensive list of options when it comes to race, gender, and geographic location. And in many cases, organizations ask for this type of information, but do not require it as it's seen as an invasion of privacy by their participants. Some organizations are using a participant's title, such as Mr. and Mrs., to identify their gender, but titles do not infer a gender, such as doctor and professor, must then be left out of the population study or be categorized as unknown. And finally, there are individuals who do not identify with a specific gender and or do not wish to identify a title or their gender in surveys. This results again in the final calculations being imprecise. For our 2021 survey, we hope to build on the foundations we've established and continue to explore potential correlations between SDO size and industry segment and underrepresentation of gender groups or interest categories within those segments. We also hope to explore efforts by SDOs to address time constraints that deter underrepresented groups from participating with the hopes of identifying strategies that are working for different groups. In regards to issues of gender, we will continue to explore both the reasons why SDOs are not currently tracking the demographics of their participants, and also for those SDOs that have pursued initiatives of diversity and inclusion, what successes have they experienced and in what ways. So for those SDOs that may be listening to this presentation, please reach out to the Women in Standards to be included in our upcoming survey. Beyond our survey, Women in Standards is also working closely with standardization industry partners to identify additional hurdles that are preventing the participation of women in standards and seeking common guidance and solutions that can be used by the industry. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.